Hello. So for today, what we're going to do is we are going to discuss the works cited page. Now, in terms of research, learning how to do the works cited page, which is what we're going to go over this week, and learning how to do the in-text citations, is those two things are going to be very important. So make sure that you do have your textbook handy whenever I'm doing this and whenever I'm talking through things, because you will want to have that to look at. Make sure also that you have a paper and pen handy. You'll want to take good notes. If you don't have good citations, you won't end up with a great research paper, because you do have to cite things appropriately. That is a requirement for this essay. If there's anything that I say within this video lecture that you have a question about, or that you want expansion upon, or that you want to discuss further, please don't hesitate to let me know. So what you want to do first is get your textbook handy. I've got mine right in front of me, and I would recommend turning to page 508, and you can just kind of have that handy because we'll refer to that in just a minute. Before we do that, though, what I'm going to do is just take some notes, and to do that, I'll just switch to a little whiteboard here. Okay, so here's where you'll want to start taking notes. Again, today's focus is going to be on the works cited page. Now, make sure whenever you write works cited that you do have that S on there. If you only had one source you were using in a paper, you would not have that S on there, but we are going to be using multiple sources for every paper that you write. Therefore, you will have that S on there. So a works cited page, to talk about that, what we're going to do first is discuss the idea of citations. So to understand the works cited page, we first need to understand what it means to cite. To cite, if you haven't done it before, or if you have, just as a refresher, means to give credit. Now, whenever we give credit to other sources, so what that means is if I'm writing a paper and I get something from someplace else, something from a website or from a book, I need to give credit to that author. So I need to do that in two different ways. The first way, and I have to do both of these, one is essentially useless without the other. The first way that I cite is on a works cited page. And the second way that I do this is through in-text citations. Now, as you can tell from what we just said, our focus today is going to be on the works cited page. So whenever you give credit, make sure to remember that you will end up with both of these. So that's something to keep in mind throughout the next 2 weeks. So for the works cited page, what you want to know is that a works cited page is a list of sources that you have used within your essay. Now, when we say a list of sources that we have used, what we mean is we've either used the author's direct words or we've paraphrased them. And I'm going to talk about quotes and paraphrases a little bit more next week. But to quote means to use a source's exact words, and to paraphrase means to get a portion of that source's words and to put it into my own words. So I really like to emphasize that early on, because oftentimes people will say, well, I changed up the words, therefore I don't have to give credit. But you do, because you're using their ideas. So make sure as you do research, if you find something from someplace, go ahead and say you find it from a website, do a works cited entry for that website. If you read a book and learn something that you put in your paper, go ahead and do a works cited entry for that. Now, a works cited page is made up of, as I just stated, works cited entries. And let me go ahead and close this out, and I'm going to show you a works cited page. And this is on Canvas. There it is. This is within this week's module on Canvas. So this is roughly what a works cited page looks like. I asked you to turn to page 508 in your textbook, though, because it's a little bit of a better example in terms of the fact that they use the appropriate font. So on this example, everything is formatted appropriately except for the font, so just bear that in mind. But this is roughly what a works cited page will look like. Now, make note of the fact that a works cited page will end up being the last page of your essay. But what I'm asking you to do is to do the works cited page before you begin writing the essay. And this is what I tend to do every time I write a paper. And it sounds a little bit like a backwards way to do it, but I promise it makes your life a lot easier in the long run. The first reason for that is if you're doing a report, which we are, the purpose of a report is to inform. And when you're informing, what you have to do is read what other sources say about a topic, and then you're going to condense that down into a paper. So in order for me to tell what sources are saying, I have to have those sources. So you're going to have your sources before you begin writing. Therefore, you would be able to do a works cited page for those. Now, you are able to add as you write. You're able to change them out, but you are going to begin with a tentative works cited page, which we'll talk about a little bit more, how to format that. So in terms of formatting, a works cited page at the top center will always have the words works cited. You'll notice also that what we have on here are multiple works cited entries. So this is a works cited entry, this is an entry, this is an entry, so on and so forth. And I have one entry for every source that I've used. So if I get something from a book, I put that book on here. If I get something from a magazine, I put that magazine on here. Now, with regard to the entries, the first thing that you'll notice in terms of organization on this page, we'll get into how to format the specific entries in a little bit, but you will want to alphabetize the works cited entries. And what you do is you alphabetize by what comes first. So in this one, it's Adams, so it's a name. But you'll notice down here it's a title because that source didn't have a title. So again, you alphabetize by what comes first. And the reason for that is whenever you do your in-text citations, which we'll talk about next week, you want your audience to very easily be able to flip back to the works cited page and find what they're looking for. So you'll see when we do the in-text citations, it sets up a very easy correlation if you do alphabetize appropriately. The next thing you'll know about the entries on this works cited page is that they have kind of a different indentation. And this indentation is called a hanging indent, and that's something I would write down. So for your works cited page, alphabetize your sources and use a hanging indent. Those are the biggies. This page is double-spaced, Times New Roman, 12-point font, just like your other essays were as well, because, again, it is the last page of an essay, so it's going to have that formatting on it. But with regard to the hanging indentation, it's very easy to get. So I'll show you how to do that. But basically, if you want to go ahead and jot it down, to get this hanging indent, and a hanging indent is just the opposite of a normal indentation. So the first line is not indented, but the others are. So to get that, you just highlight the entry, and in Word, you'll do Control-T. Now, if you are using Google Docs, you'll have to manually change the ruler settings. So in Google Docs, at the very top, you'll see a little ruler, and it has like a little hourglass on it. And the bottom part of the hourglass, you just slide over to a 1/2 inch. And you can just look up how to do a hanging indent in Google Docs too if you want kind of a video tutorial of that, just showing you. So for the entries themselves, again, you have one entry for each source you used. You do not have to do a separate entry for each time you use the source. So if I use this American Management Association 10 times in my essay, I still just have to have it one time on my works cited page. The purpose of a works cited page is to give your audience more information about the sources that you've used within your essay. So you'll notice within an essay, and you'll see this next week when we do in-text citations, in-text citations are little small signals within your essay to sources on the works cited entry. So if I'm reading someone's essay and they have a quote, they would have an in-text citation at the end of that quotation. And from that in-text citation, I can look on the works cited page and see where that source came from. So I can see the URL. If it was a website, I'm able to see the publication information. So if I want to pull up that exact source myself, I'm able to do that. So that's the purpose of the works cited page, to act as a reference for your audience if they want to do further research. So that's essentially what a works cited page is. Again, just a list of sources you've used in your essay. Now, the thing about this is that the formatting is kind of particular. You do have to format works cited entries in a very specific way. So I'm going to come off of screen sharing right now. And this is where you'll really want to have your textbook handy. If you don't have your textbook right in front of you, jot down these page numbers so that when you do have it in front of you, you can use it, because at this point in the semester, everyone should have their textbook. If you do not have a textbook in front of you when you're trying to do a works cited entry, you can just Google Purdue OWL. So Purdue is P-U-R-D-U-E, and OWL is O-W-L for Online Writing Lab. So if you Google Purdue OWL MLA works cited entries, you can find a list of how to do what your textbook tells you to do. It's just a little bit easier in your textbook since you can more quickly flip back and forth. So in your textbook, what you'll want to do is bookmark the page 480. This is where the MLA section on how to format those specific works cited entries begins. Now, I do not expect you to memorize what goes where in every single works cited entry. What I do expect, though, is that you use your textbook or you use the Purdue OWL to check and to format your works cited entries. And as you're going to see in just a minute, because I'll show you how to do this, I'm not opposed to citation generators. So if you've used EasyBib or Citation Machine, Noodle Tools is another one. If you've used those in the past and you like them, I think that's totally fine. But the thing to remember is that it's a computer doing it, and they make mistakes. They make mistakes in regard to leaving information out. Sometimes things are not capitalized appropriately, and sometimes they put incorrect things in fields, so they put things where they don't go. So like I said, a works cited entry, and you see this, they're fairly short. It's not a whole lot of information in each one. But the thing about that is, if it tells you you have to have a period in a certain place, that's what has to go there. So because of the fact that it is such a specific thing, you want to be careful with it and you want to check it, and using your textbook or Purdue OWL is the way you want to do that. So page 480 is where this begins. And I've got my textbook in front of me, and I just dropped my pen. So that's kind of why I keep looking down. If you've got your textbook in front of you, you can follow along with me again. If not, just jot these items down. But on pages 480 and 481, items 1 through 5 that you'll see on there, what those do is those show you how to deal with different author situations. So what you're going to find is sometimes sources have one author, sometimes they have 2, sometimes they have 10, sometimes they have no author. And depending on that author situation, you're going to have to format the author portion of a works cited entry, which is always the first thing in the works cited entry, as you'll see as you look through your textbook. You're going to have to format it differently depending on that situation. So this shows you how to do that. So with one author, that is a single author, it'll go last name, comma, first name, period. And I'm just stating this instead of writing out notes since you have a textbook. If you have 2 authors, make sure to look at the top of 481. Again, always check citations that are generated against this. The thing about MLA that's kind of different if you have 2 authors is it'll go last name, comma, first name, but then it goes comma, then and first name, last name. And you'll see that in your textbook, again, on number 2, page 481. And the reason for that is because if it kept going last name, comma, first name, comma, last name, comma, first name, it would just look a little messy. So they put that and in there just as a clear separator. Now, if you have 3 or more authors on page 481, that's a pretty easy situation because all you have there is last name, comma, first name, and then comma, et al. And et al, E-T space A-L period, just means and others. This is a more recent change in MLA, so if you happen to have an older version of the textbook that's not this one, it may have it listed incorrectly in there. So that's why you want the updated textbook. If you don't have the updated textbook, use the Purdue OWL because they're always up to date. But used to, if you had 6 authors, you'd have to write all of them out. So that is a new thing. Number 5 is the other one on page 481 that I would draw your attention to. If an author is not listed, you can just leave it out. And that is going to be the case sometimes, especially for websites. If you're on a website like National Geographic, what you can do is you can put National Geographic as the corporate author But oftentimes what people do is leave it as no author, so it would stay blank. And for websites like that, where you have a corporation as the author, they often won't have a person's name listed, so you could just leave it out if need be. And again, you see that at the bottom of 481. Now, I'm not going to go through this entire MLA works cited section in your textbook because that would be monotonous and probably unnecessary because not all of you will be using every single source type. A note on source types, though, is that for this essay and for other essays, you want to make sure to vary your source types. So you're required to have at least 4 sources. You don't want all 4 of those sources to be websites, meaning things you find on Google. So instead, you could have 2 websites, a journal article, and a book. Or you could have 3 websites and a journal article, just as long as they're not all the same. That kind of variation does lend some credibility and depth to your research, which is why you want to do that. So for that reason, you are going to have to know how to cite different source types. And last week, you had a lot of information provided on Canvas about those source types, so make sure to look back over it if you have any questions. But if you have a book that you're using, on page 482, number 7, is how you format that works cited entry. And again, make sure to follow it to the piece of punctuation. So if it tells you to put a comma in, put a comma in. Now, sometimes you won't have certain pieces of information available. So for instance, the example here, the book has a subtitle. Not all books have subtitles, so if it doesn't have one, ignore that. But all books will have a title. They'll all have a publisher. They'll all have a publication year. The next item of note, and again, I'm not going to go through all of these. You'll see me skipping around a little bit. Page 488, number 21, an article in a scholarly journal. Now, in just a second, I am going to show you how to pull citations automatically from our library databases, so that'll make life a little bit easier. But even when you pull those citations, meaning they've generated them for you, you don't have to do it from scratch, you'll want to check them against your textbook. So it just shows you where everything goes. And what you'll notice about works cited pages is it's like paint by number. You just get the information and plug it in where it goes. It's not a process that's highly thoughtful. You just plug in information. And if you have questions about what goes where, just let me know. I will do an example a little bit later on for you, though, if that helps. Number 22 on here is a magazine article. With magazines, make sure if you do use a magazine in your paper that it's a good, credible one. If it's one of those magazines where 90% of the magazine is made up of advertisements, I may question its credibility. There are some really good tech magazines, car magazines, specialty magazines. Those can be really solid, but usually if they're the glossy ones in the supermarket checkout, you might question it. But if it's one of those good magazines, this is how you would cite it. Number 23 is a newspaper article. With newspaper articles, bear in mind, and this kind of ties into the issue of credibility from last week, newspaper articles can be great, but be aware of the fact that the scope of a newspaper article is often limited, mainly because they can be quite short. And another reason for that is that they only provide a snapshot of a snippet in time, which is not a bad thing, but you do want to flesh it out with other source types. So for instance, I typically every year have someone write about the Salem witch trials. We do have an America's Historical Newspapers database on our library webpage, which I'll kind of give you an overview in just a little bit. But I've had someone find a newspaper article from the witch trials, and that supplemented their paper really well. And the reason that was so good is because we got a glimpse of the language and the thought process of the time. So newspaper articles can be excellent supplements to your paper, so they can be very good sources to use. So on 488 is how you would cite that. Page 492, this is the one you'll need to use probably the most. Number 28 is a short work from a website. And you have on number 29 the entire website. It's very rare that you'll use a whole website. Using a whole website would be like if I were citing National Geographic and I used the whole National Geographic website. It's more likely that I'm on the giraffe page of National Geographic or I'm on a short subset. So I'm probably going to be using 28 more than I would 29. So to cite a short work from a website, you've got your instructions here. You'll notice there is kind of a pattern with works cited entries, so it's always the author, then it's a short title and a long title, and then you get your publication information after in a varying order. So with this one, I'll kind of show you how to do that, but be aware, and you'll see this if you're with me in your textbook. In blue, it says publisher or sponsor of website if different from title. Most of the time, the publisher of the website is the same as the title of the website. And what they're mostly referring to there is what's in a logo at the very top. So if I'm on BBC, there's usually a BBC logo at the top, so BBC is the title of my website. So if those two are the same, which again, they typically are, you don't have to put it twice. 493, number 32 is an online book. Ebooks are totally fine with me. I think ebooks and books should be seen as the same because it's just a different format. We do have some great ebook resources on our website, which I'll show you as well. Page 494 has an excellent kind of picture diagram of how to cite from a website as well. So if you're like me, I'm kind of a visual learner. So if you kind of need to see that mapped out, I would recommend looking there. The next item on here that you may use is page 501, and you can use any of these types of sources. I just like to call out the ones that are used most frequently. 501 is an interview. So what that citation is if you find a published interview. The reason I'm calling attention to this, though, is because if you look at page 502, right above the number 48, it says for interviews that you conduct yourself, and then it tells you how to do that. So you'll want to include the name of the interviewee, the interview type. So the interview type could be a personal interview, email interview, Facebook interview. There are many different methods. And then the date of that interview. So interviews can be excellent supplements, but I would not include more than one. If you are including an interview, make sure that it's with an expert in that field because you don't just want to interview kind of a random person about it. You want to interview someone with some expertise. Number 48 on page 502 is a TV program. You can also, this isn't in here, but if you need to cite like a Netflix documentary or something, if you Google MLA citation Netflix documentary, it'll show you the order for that. So you can cite TV programs, documentaries, you can cite YouTube videos. The YouTube videos, it doesn't show you how to cite in here as well, but you can Google that. You can do YouTube citation MLA format, and it'll bring it up for you. Just make sure, like with any source, look at the publisher. So if the YouTube video is just kind of a random unknown person, I probably wouldn't use it. But if it's a video of, say, a Harvard lecture, and you look up the professor's credentials, and it's good, you can absolutely use that. So that's how to create the works cited entries. So the main thing you see there is to use your textbook. When you first start doing it, if it's something you're unfamiliar with, you're going to be flipping back in your textbook a lot, and that is okay. Whenever I'm creating citations myself, I still use my textbook to check myself to make sure everything's in the right place. Again, I don't think it's necessary that you memorize it, but I do think it's necessary that you have your resources available to you so that you can make sure you end up with a good, solid, quality product. So again, you will have to submit your works cited page to me with those 4 to 7 sources so I can check them. And that's all I want is the works cited page. You don't have to send me a copy of the sources or anything like that. But oftentimes, again, doing your works cited page first is going to make life a little bit easier later on, and you'll see that kind of as our research process unfolds. Now with this, what I want to do next is show you guys how to navigate our library webpage to find some good sources. So I'm going to share my screen right now. Okay, so I'm on the MECC webpage. On here, you can get to library, I would talk, by just scrolling down a little bit, and you'll see library on there. So I'm going to click there. The great thing about our library webpage is they have a lot of wonderful resources available to you online. So to find good journal articles, And journal articles are great resources because, as you saw in our last week's module, they're peer-reviewed, they're credible, we know that they're good. So you can find those as PDFs online without having to go to an actual library. You can find ebooks. So I just kind of want to give you an overview of some of these resources. So on our library webpage, what you do is scroll down a little bit, and you'll see we've got 3 sections. So there's books, journals, and reference. So here you've got how to access a bunch of ebooks. Here's some excellent journals, and these are your reference. Reference are things like, of course, encyclopedias, dictionaries, etc. So I'm going to click on one of these. I'm going to do the EBSCO Host ebooks, and the reason I'm doing this is it's twofold. The first reason is I want you to see how they work, and the second reason is I want to show you how to pull works cited entries from them, just to show that the works cited page isn't necessarily a difficult or intimidating thing. So let's say I'm doing my report on No Child Left Behind Act. So I'm going to look for a book on that. So this pops up, and I'm just going to look up No Child Left Behind. And you'll notice you do have some advanced search options if you click on it. So you can limit that if you'd like to, if you needed to limit it by date or anything. For this one, I'm just going to leave it open. And I'm going to hit search. And you'll notice I have quite a few books on here. The main thing is to scroll to find something that meets your needs. So I'm going to just click on this second one. So on here you have all of your information about the book, including the cover. Now to open the book, all you have to do is on the left you can do the full text or a full download. I'm just going to open up the PDF full text. And it shows me the book. So it's pretty cool. With this, what you want to do is as soon, and this is my first big thing, so I'll jot this down. In research, the process you want to go through is as you find sources, go ahead and do the works cited entry for them. Do not find all of your sources and then say, well, I'll go back and do the works cited entries, because you're just doubling the amount of work that you have to do. So let's say that I think this is a great book. The first thing I'm going to do is cite it. Typically on all of our databases, there's somewhere that says cite or citation tools or something like that. So I'm going to click cite, and you'll notice there are a lot of different citation formats. We're using MLA, which is Modern Language Association. So I'm going to scroll down to MLA. I'm going to highlight that citation and hit copy. Now what I'm going to do, and this is the process I go through whenever I'm doing research, and I'm going to share a different screen. Okay, so what I do is I go ahead and format my works cited page. So I do need to be in Times New Roman, 12-point font, double space, and remove space after paragraph. Then I'm going to center works cited at the top. I'm going to hit enter and back, enter, and then I'm going to left justify again here at the top. And then all I have to do is paste that citation I just copied. So I paste by doing Control-V. You can also right-click and hit paste. Now the thing is, when you do this, and this is pretty cool because, again, it gave me that citation from the textbook. I didn't have to go through and manually hunt and peck for all this information, but I do need to clean it up a little bit. So you'll notice the font is off and it's got that weird gray highlight behind it. Let me zoom in. I need to tell it not to do that. So the important thing is as soon as you paste it on here, hit that little control button, and then you'll see that one in the middle with the blue arrow. You'll click that, okay? Now it's starting to look like a works cited page from your textbook, right? So all I need to do from here is put my indentation on there. So again, we use a hanging indent. So I'm going to highlight that citation and hit Control-T. And then I'm going to proofread this. So this is a journal article. So I would get my textbook, and you can hear me flipping. I'm going to turn to page 488, number 21, and check the citation against that. is correct. You'll notice I also deleted a space that wasn't supposed to be there. So I've got one source. And then what I would do is flip back to my source. There it is. And then what I can do is I can save it. So I can save pages, or I can copy pages as needed. Books is a little bit different because sometimes you can't save the whole book. This one did give us the option to download the whole thing though. So I would want to save it. So that's the second big item that I would write on there. So if I have to sign in there, but I can do that. All you'd have to do is log back in. But from here, what you want to do is, again, save or print it. So the first thing is cite your source. The second thing is save or print it. If it is something like this, it's a book that you know you want to flip back to later on, you can just email yourself over here the little link to it, and that might be a little bit easier, so you can just go back to it that way. But I suggest doing these as you go, again, to save time. So what I'm going to do is close that out, and I'm back on our library webpage. Here, what I need to do is I'm going to go back and look at journals. Now, any of these journals, they're all good, okay? One of my preferences, though, is under journals. I like to use academic search. So let's say I'm doing the same topic. You'll notice this looks a lot like that eBooks database I used. So I'm going to look up No Child Left Behind again. And again, this is under journals, so it's going to pull up journal articles for me. The thing with journal articles is that some of them, the language is a little bit convoluted or too specific, so you really need to make sure to read over that source. You can scan it to make sure it's going to be useful to you. So I'm just going to click on the very first one. You, of course, would want to sift through and make sure you can find something that's of use to you. And when you write the report, remember, you get to determine the aspects of your topic that you cover. So the sources you find will help you determine the aspects of your topic that you cover. So what you always want to do is scroll down, and I'm going to read the abstract, which is kind of like the blurb on the back of the book. If it sounds useful to me, I'm going to open up the PDF full text over here. And just like with the other one, let's say I read through this journal article and I decide, you know, this is something I can use in my paper. What I want to do is cite it. So over here on the right side, you will see the little yellow sheet of paper. If you click that, you can scroll down to MLA, and then I would copy and paste that onto my Works Cited page, just like I did the other one. And I won't model that again, so I won't have to switch screens, but you would just copy it over, and then, of course, check that against your journal citation within your textbook. And I misspoke on the last one. On the last one, I wouldn't use page 488. I would have used page 493, the online book, to check that previous citation. I would use my journal one to check this one. You want to match them to the source, so I misspoke there. But I would want to check this against my textbook. And then the next thing I would do, like I said earlier, is I would want to save or print it. So I'm just going to hit download, and then I could save it. And you can just save that to your flash drive, or if you wanted to print it, you could do that as well. Okay, so what I've shown you so far is how to pull a citation for an ebook or a journal. You can get on any of these types of databases, though, and find sources. So, for instance, this Newspaper Source Plus, like I said, you could look up newspaper articles. There's always going to be a citation tools button on there. If you scroll down a little further, this Statista always gives you great statistics. Films on Demand is great because it's like a credible version of YouTube. So there are a lot of great sources on here that I really encourage you to search through and play with depending on the topic that you're writing about. Now, websites. This is the next and last thing that I'll be covering. Citing websites can be a little bit different. You are permitted to use generators, citation generators, if you would like. So just to kind of model that, I'm going to go to Google, and I'm going to look up No Child Left Behind Act. So when you're looking at websites, Again, make sure to always look at your publisher, see who's putting the information out there when you're determining credibility. You always want to avoid Wikipedia. I would also recommend avoiding debate.org and procon.org as well. But let's say I'm going to click, I'm just going to do this one from edweek.org. And we're going to pretend that I have read over this and that it's useful to me, okay? So yours will be just a touch slower since you'll have that read-through process. I can use my textbook to help me with that citation. So I could just flip to, let's see, what number is it? Page 492, number 28, and do my citation. If I do that, what I'll do first is look for the author, which is right there, Allison Klein. If I had not had an author, I would leave that out. The next thing I look for is the title of a short work, which is right here. It's No Child Left Behind, an overview. And I close that in quotation marks just like in the textbook. The title of the website is, again, that logo at the top, Education Week, and that's italicized just like in my textbook. The publisher or sponsor would be the same, so I'm going to skip that. My date of publication is September 6th. No, that's today. My date of publication, let's see, do I have that? If you have a date of publication, it'll either be at the very top or very bottom. This one doesn't have a date of publication, so I'm going to skip that, which is okay. Oh, no, there it is, April 10th, 2015. So I have a date of publication. So I'll do 10 space April space 2020, because, again, if you look at the example, that's how they want it written. And then I'm going to have my URL. So the URL is this up here at the top. So you could do your citation that way, manually. Or what you can do is you can open up another window, and I would say just open up another window so you can toggle back and forth. And you can go to easybib.com. And this is, again, a citation generator. You'll notice it has a ton of ads on it. So I'm going to go to Create Citations. And then I'm going to go back to my website and copy that URL. Then I'm back at EasyBib, and that was a website. I'm going to paste in my URL and hit search. It makes you hit search a bunch of times, or search or cite. Then I'm going to hit cite, and it found it, as I can see over here, and I'm going to hit continue. So if you use this, make sure to check it. It's pulling in my information. It did pull up the wrong date, because it was April 10th, 2015, and it said April 20th, 2020. So I need to fix that. Sometimes it'll pull in the wrong website title or wrong short work title. And right here it says No Child Left Behind, an overview, so I need to fix that too. And then I'm going to hit Complete Citation. And from here, you'll see it did the citation, so I just have to copy it, and then I can paste that on my Works Cited page. And make sure as you're pasting citations on that you do fix your formatting. So merge the formatting and then put the hanging indentation on there. The very last thing I'll note with finding sources is, again, save or print them as you find them. When you save a website, the easiest thing to do is while you're on the page, do Control-P or hit File, Print. So I'm going to do Control-P like I'm printing. And then from the printer, you should be able to change it from a printer and go to Save as PDF or Print as PDF. It'll do one of the two, and you can save to your flash drive that way. Okay. So those are some of my biggest tips. So we went over two big things today. The first one is how to format the Works Cited page and how to format the Works Cited entries. And the second is how to pull citations from some of our major sources. Again, as you find sources for this paper, check their credibility. If you have questions about whether something is or isn't credible, please feel free to send me an email. Remember that even though we're not on campus, and even though we don't have face-to-face office hours, I don't want you to feel like you can't contact me. So you can always call during office hours. You can always email. You can let me know if you need a Zoom meeting, anything like that. I'm happy to accommodate in any way that I can. But if you have any questions, please just let me know, and I hope you have a great week.